is something that I believe we're missing in our school systems. We're teaching human beings, but we're not teaching them how to be human.
Or I would say, we understand the human, the physiology, but we don't understand the being within. And so to understand the being within is to understand the spirit of the human. And the more I go deeper within myself, I'm able to find who I truly am in a spiritual identity. And yes, it's a subject that only very few are interested to explore in today's world.
Why?
Because the external world has become so attractive. It's become so glamorous, it's become so beautiful, so all our senses are pulling us out there. I see beautiful things, I hear wonderful things, I want to touch something that's very beautiful. So our physical senses are ruling, and we've forgotten that the being inside is the being that's actually making meaning and understanding what it is that's going on. But today we talk about identity crisis, and the identity crisis, not just east or west or north and south or gender, but identity crisis is really the fact that we are identifying with our material form, matter, and so materialism and consumerism have taken over. And I think that the answers that we need to all the problems of the world today are not answers out there, they're actually answers within. And so we need to go on that inner journey and discover the self.
Namaste, Om Shanti, Sister Jayanti.
Namaste, Om Shanti.
I'm a great admirer of everything that you do, and I'm just so grateful for your work in the world and everything that you give. These conversations are called Moved by Love, and there are very few people who can do what you do and move people with love in the way that you do. So I'm just really grateful to have you on, and for anybody who listens, whether that be one person or 1,000 people, to be able to connect with that love. I would love if you could set us off with a meditation or a prayer or any sharing that you wish, so that we can find ourselves.
Thank you. Yes, it'd be lovely to begin with a meditation. So we ourselves get into that awareness, and our viewers also do the same. So just sitting comfortably, going on an inner journey and coming to that space inside where only I can enter. Going deeper and deeper to that sacred space where there is love, peace, and truth. And in this awareness, I feel the presence of the divine, the supreme, the being of light, the source of love, peace, and truth. And in the presence of the divine, these qualities reach not only me, but these qualities spread out to the whole of the human family. These qualities reach all forms of life and even nature itself. And the planet is surrounded with this pure love, constant peace, and absolute truth. I hold this vision so that we may move towards it together. Om Shanti.
That was beautiful. Thank you. So I'll go straight in with a question. I'm just intrigued to learn a little bit about your personal journey before we go into areas of Dharma, spiritual action, and environment, and all of the other things I would love to learn from you about. But please do tell me about your personal journey.
I was born in Pune, in Maharashtra, but my family had migrated from Sindh immediately, during partition. And so we were staying, my grandparents, my great-grandmother, and my mother, and my father was away on business. And it was me and my little brother together in that family. So it was 4 generations, and it was very beautiful. And it was a very loving childhood. And around age 7, a senior person from the Brahma Kumaris came to visit our home because my grandfather has helped her out at some point, and she heard that my grandfather was unwell. So she came to see him, and she was sharing spiritual ideas, and I was running around, not listening. But my mother and grandmother were listening very intently. And very soon after that, my grandfather became well, but they started to go to the center, which was there in Pune, the Brahma Kumaris ashram. And that would have been around February. And in March and April, we have summer holidays in India. And so in the summer holidays, there was a little garden just beside where the center was. And about 10 of us, around all my age, about 7, 8, 9 years old, we would gather together and we would meet one of the sisters and have questions and games and all sorts of things. And so that was my introduction to the Brahma Kumaris. And then around Diwali time, October, that same year, by then my father had come back from Africa, and now he had a plan to go to London to start business there. He'd been invited by someone to be a partner there. And so in October, we met with Brahma Baba in Delhi. And that was a very beautiful, powerful experience. It was meeting a grandfather who was very loving and kind. And soon after that, we came to London. And my mother continued with her daily practice of early morning rising, meditation, spiritual study. And every evening, she would sit with me and my brother, and she would read us a little part of the teachings. And a time came when both of us said, my brother and myself, Mom, we don't really understand all this. And she was very kind and said, okay, let's leave it. And so for a few years then, I had no spirituality in my life. And even when I came to India, when we came back after being away, that was 1964, and I was 15, I had no interest in spirituality at that point either. But the next time I came back, 1966, I decided I'd join my mother in a visit to Mount Abu. And in that visit, I met Brahma Baba again. And at that time, he looked at me and he said, I would be a spiritual teacher. And I could scarcely understand the language he was using, Hindi. But I felt whatever he was saying was something nice. But I just took it on that level. I came back again in 67. And this time I came back with an intention of staying for a longer period of time. I'd had an out-of-body experience. I just started university in London. And that out-of-body experience was, I was like up here, looking at myself down below in the lecture theatre, and I was scribbling things. And I asked myself the question, what are you doing? What is the point of all this? And I told myself, come back. And so I made myself come back again and was scribbling again. And when I shared this experience with my parents that evening, my father said, you know something? You've not known India. You've gone on holiday, but you don't know your roots. You should spend some time in India. And I was very happy. And so came back to India again, 67 December. And the first few months of, that was December anyway, so the first few months of 68, I was a social butterfly and a tourist. And then my head began to feel a bit woolly. And I thought, what can India offer that I can learn? Not uni, because that would have been rote, learning by rote, because I saw my cousins do that. But I thought, let me go and see Dadi Janki, this lady who was there in Pune. And I went to see her. She knew me. And she said, do you want to say something or shall I? I said, Dadi, tell me. I've come to listen. And she spoke about conscience. And she said that at the moment, our conscience has been overlaid with so many different layers. Media, society, friends, education, all of these things. And so it's not so easy for us to see the difference between right and wrong, or to decide what it is we need to do. And she'd actually put a finger on the pulse, because I had Western society, I had traditional Indian society, and by then it was the permissive society, and then there was a spiritual path. And I had no idea which was the one for me. And so she must have picked it up. And so I said, well, how can you decide? And she said, you have to clean the conscience. How? You have to learn to meditate. And so my journey began. And 6 weeks later, I decided this is to be my life.
Wow.
And 2 weeks after that, I was in Abu. And when I said to Brahma Baba, he was still around, this is June 1968. And he said to me, he was 93, and I was by then just 19. And he said, child, what would you like to tell me? And I said, Baba, I want to surrender and serve. And he said, I knew it already. And then that scene of 3 years earlier came back to my mind. I'd forgotten about that. It came back again. And my journey of service began. And then there was a time when, having been there in terms of service, I was asked to come back to London again to start a centre here.
That's quite a short time period, isn't it? 6 weeks from you going to India on an exploratory trip and then dedicating your entire life towards the cause.
But I'd known the Brahma Kumaris since childhood, so I knew the people, and I knew them as lovely people. I don't know anything more, but lovely people.
You were at that time, you met early?
Very little, very little.
You went straight to Mamampu.
Yeah, but also say the traditional places, Bombay, Delhi, Jaipur, and that's it, and Abu.
And that time period, during the development of the Brahma Kumaris, it wasn't what we see today. It has this huge organization. What was it like at that time?
Mount Abu was very simple, the headquarters. For example, there was only one tap where there was running hot water. The bathrooms had cold water, but not hot water. So you had a metal bucket that you took to the tap, the central tap, and got your hot water there. And the metal bucket itself was heavy enough, and then with water. So some of the kind brothers would help us with that. But that's how simple it was. And there was just one taxi in the whole of Mount Abu. And there were no private cars around. Even today, the tribal area around Mount Abu, but beyond the city, it's quite simple. But certainly in those days, the town itself was very simple. And by the time Brahma Baba left the physical form, which was in January 1969, we had around 460 centers in India and nothing outside India. A few people who had stayed in touch with the Brahma Kumaris, having learned the teachings in India, like my mother, for example, and most of them were connected with Dadi Janki. So somehow she had a connection with countries abroad right from the very beginning.
And what were your interactions like with Brahma Baba?
I'll share one particular interaction. I mean, when I first came, when I was in 66, I was 17, and I probably looked younger than that. But the first thing Baba said to me is, at night, we'd gone to say goodnight. We'd come in the evening, and then there was a class, and then he'd said, come and say goodnight. So we'd gone to his room, very tiny little room. And he said, child, have you brought your toothbrush and paste and towel? If you've forgotten something, we can give you everything. And he said, you're not used to eating chapatis, and we don't have bread here in the ashram, but we can get it from the bakery outside. So it was the loving parent, just care and love. And I said to Baba, we are used to chapatis. My mother makes them at home. And I not forgotten those things because she was there to remind me. So it was just a very loving exchange at that time. Then at the moment when I decided to surrender, that night, again, there was a small group of people around, and there was a bunch of jasmine flowers just by his pillow. And we have open eyes meditation, in which I'm in the awareness of the soul. I see you as a soul, but between us is the source, the divine. And so it's the divine that's sharing that love, power with us. And so we call this drishti, the vision of soul consciousness and God's remembrance. So Brahma Baba was giving drishti to all of us, and I was maybe third or fourth in line. Baba started giving me drishti, then beckoned me across, and I was just 2 steps away anyway, but I came very close. And he picked up the flowers, very fragrant jasmine flowers in the month of June. It's warm, so the scent is amazing. So he was giving me these flowers, but more than that, he was giving me drishti. And it was like a magnet pulled me out from here and carried me into a different dimension. And it was a dimension of light. And in that dimension, I was able to connect with the source. And I don't know how long he held that, but then it was like he reduced the voltage, and I came back again, and I became aware of people around me. And he's still looking at me, and he asked a question. Do you know what Baba's doing? And across the way was Sister Jayanti, and she was nodding her head, and she knew exactly what had happened. And she said afterwards, at that time, nobody spoke, she just nodded. And afterwards she said to me, it was your new birth, wasn't it? And I said, yes. So it was a very, very powerful experience.
That's beautiful. You know, the first thing that you shared really resonated with me. I've read a lot of books from Daniel Goleman, who was one of the founders of emotional intelligence. And he stayed with Neem Karoli Baba in the 60s, around the similar time when you were in India. And I remember one of his quotations that he said he had studied psychology at Harvard, and here he was in India at the ashram, and Neem Karoli Baba was asking him as a Westerner, are you okay? It gets cold in the hills. Have you got blankets? What else? Is there anything that you need? Making sure that they've eaten well. Kind of like a loving grandparent, taking care of that person in such a loving way. And he said something, it seemed to me that modern psychology, Western psychology, had missed the point. And we were trying to dissect and analyze the human mind, but really there was a deeper level of love and human potential that we weren't really expanding on. And my experiences of studying in the UK, in the West, we didn't really explore love. We didn't explore human potential in that way. It was very much studying a subject on technical knowledge, not human knowledge. And that for me is something that I believe we're missing in our school systems. We're teaching human beings, but we're not teaching them how to be human.
Or I would say, we understand the human, the physiology, but we don't understand the being within. And so to understand the being within is to understand the spirit of the human. And the more I go deeper within myself, I'm able to find who I truly am in a spiritual identity. And yes, it's a subject that only very few are interested to explore in today's world.
Why?
Because the external world has become so attractive. It's become so glamorous. It's become so beautiful. So all our senses are pulling us out there. I see beautiful things. I hear wonderful things. I want to touch something that's very beautiful. So our physical senses are ruling. And we've forgotten that the being inside is the being that's actually making meaning and understanding what it is that's going on. But today we talk about identity crisis. And the identity crisis, not just east or west or north and south or gender, but identity crisis is really the fact that we are identifying with our material form, matter, and so materialism and consumerism have taken over. And I think that the answers that we need to all the problems of the world today are not answers out there, they're actually answers within. And so we need to go on that inner journey and discover the self.
I often call this inner social action. Would you agree that this is also a form of social action to heal a lot of the challenges that we face?
Absolutely.
On the planet?
Agree. It's a discovery of our values. It's a discovery of the method to be able to heal the self and bring about the transformation that's needed.
And what is that? What is the self?
The things that are not visible, my thoughts, my feelings, my personality, my memory, my conscience, all this is part of the inner being. And you can't measure any of these things, so they're definitely not physical. My mind can go to the past in a moment, an hour ago. My mind can go back to childhood days. But within a flash, I can go to tomorrow. What are my plans? What will I be doing a year from now? So the mind is able to cross the dimensions of time, past, present, future, but also dimensions of space. I can think about the ashram in Mount Abu. I can think about New York or Bombay within one breath. And so physically, none of that is possible. But the thoughts, the feelings can transcend time and distance. And so these are the things which make up the inner being, the self. And I would put the word Atma to that, soul. And Atma gave rise to the word atom. When originally they discovered the atom, the Greeks gave them the word atom, which meant indivisible, that indivisible part. But of course, they later found particles and so on. But the Greeks got it from India, Atma, the indivisible, the eternal self, the eternal being.
Oh, I never realized that. And they was associated with that. You know, Ramdas, he always used to say, I'm not interested in your role. I'm interested in your soul.
Agree, totally.
That's difficult to, when in trying to do humanitarian work and social work and be, you know, in today's society where it is very technically driven, it's not heart-based, it's mind-based. That's quite difficult to articulate, isn't it? The social value of heart-based actions in a world which is listening with its mind. That's a difficult thing for us to try and convey. you've been going to COP since 2009. What led you from this inner social practice to being very conscious of the outer reality of non-violence, of trying to understand the predicament that nature faces, that we all face through the impact of the damage we're doing to the environment, or how we're taking care of our planet? What led to that connection?
In 1982, just that concept of the United Nations to create peace in the world, to work for peace, and seeing the connection of peace within to peace without. That led us to becoming affiliated with the UN as a non-governmental organization, as an NGO. And that, of course, meant that I was attending lots of NGO events and becoming more and more aware of the turbulence of the world and what was going on around me. And at the end of the 80s, in Geneva, at the UN offices there, they were working on something called the Earth Charter. Right. And that was very much based on spiritual values and the ethics and values of not materialism, but spirit matters. And so I became interested in that. And so I was part of the group that was working. And from that then came Rio. And Brahma Kumaris were present in Rio in 92 at the Earth Summit at that time. And I became more and more aware of all of these ideas of what human beings have done to the earth. Ahimsa, non-violence, plant-based diet. I'd been vegetarian since birth anyway, so that wasn't a new concept. And ahimsa was, again, very much part of the whole understanding of what happens. But what then happened was we became aware of climate change, and we knew that the events were going on. And by then, we were already we were the first. Brahma Kumaris was the first purely spiritual organization to be given general consultative status with ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Council of the UN. And so being part of that made it easy then to get into COP as observers. Governments are the people who are doing the discussions and negotiations, so we were given accreditation as observers there. And our message there, we had a stand, and on our stand we had people would come and say, well, what are you doing here? And we'd say, well, there's a direct link between consciousness and climate. They'd still be puzzled. And we'd say, well, consciousness determines whether we are going to be consumers or whether we're going to be more elevated in our awareness. And if we continue with consumerism, we're not getting happier, but we're wanting more and more consumerism. And so this is why we've reached the condition in the planet that we have. And if you come back to consciousness and you realize that happiness lies within, it doesn't lie in buying a new car. It doesn't lie in getting a new pair of shoes. You've already got a dozen in your closet. And when you realize this, then you're able to simplify your life and reduce your carbon footprint. Then they'd nod their heads. How many minutes did that take to explain? It takes about a minute, no longer than that. So there's a direct link between consciousness and climate. And so that's been our main message through all these years. A turning point came when UNESCO had a stand, I think it was in Bonn, and at the Bonn COP, we had our own stand, but we were moving around to see the other stands. And what I see on the UNESCO stand is changing minds, not climate. So the message was reaching out. And this year in particular, we had people talk about, from a professor from the University of Lund in Sweden. She talked about the inner development goals.
Wow.
And so this message is moving.
After all those years, Yeah, that really resonates, because I can see why people would ask you, what are you doing here? This is science or in a nature-based environment-based conference. Why are you coming here and sharing a message about consciousness? And did you get many negative, feedback, or did anybody was he disheartened through that?
There was no negative feedback, because people who come are thinking people. They don't just react. At least that's been my experience. And so they understood. They listened, and if they weren't interested, they'd walk past. But if they asked us a question, they'd actually listen to you, and it would register. Then you might not change their lifestyle in that 1 minute, but at least they understood. And another very interesting thing happened, and this was around 2013, a couple of years before the Paris Agreement. And the executive secretary of COP at that time was Mrs. Christiana Figueres. And she became a very good friend. And she made sure that faith-based organizations were recognized in the whole COP system. And people like the World Wildlife Fund, people like the Conservation of Nature, activists, they all began to acknowledge the value of faith-based organizations and the understanding that you can talk to leaders, but if you want to actually bring about change, you have to talk to the people who have an impact on the grassroots, like Professor Vandana Shiva. She told me herself personally that she loved nature, and of course she's renowned throughout the world. But she said that I never thought that religion or spirituality had anything to do with the environment. And I've now realized, this would have been around 2014 that she said this. I think that was the one in Brazil. We were there. 2012, that was Brazil again. And she told me there that I realized that without talking to people on the ground, there's never going to be change. And it's the faith-based organizations who work with the communities on the ground. And so we began to see more and more acknowledgement of people of faith. And so that was very heartening.
The first talk I ever gave was alongside Professor Vandana Shiva. And I was nowhere, like in my knowledge or awareness or anything that I was trying to do. It was good intention, but no knowledge behind it. So just literally going out, buying some food and trying to serve it to people. So to be alongside her at that early stage, I felt a great energy and passion and wisdom as well. A lot of Shakti.
Absolutely.
So she was a very, inspiring person.
She's amazing.
Yeah. How do you think she's been successful in what she's trying to do? Are people listening?
I think people are listening, but governments aren't. Unfortunately, there are so many vested interests. I'll give you one example. I don't know how many people from the oil industry were there before Glasgow. Not so many, I think, but certainly in Glasgow, at that time, it was 1,500 people from the oil industry there. And the numbers have grown and grown and grown until today, it's like nearly 2,000 people from the oil industry. And the last 3 COPs have been in petrostates. And this year they captured the presidency of the Azerbaijan COP, talking to traders to talk about agreements to be signed during COP. So, on the one hand, there's good words being spoken, but on the other hand, where money is involved, then fossil fuel takes the lead. And so we're going in the opposite direction.
Do you know there's that Martin Luther King Jr. quote, "Those who love peace need to learn to organize more than those who love war."
Yes.
And I feel like in terms of organizing, the Brahma Kumaris as an organization have been particularly strong in coordination and working with very little resources to expand and share a message of love. Now applying that to environmental work across all organizations, like the idea of ahimsa. What do you think it would take for ahimsa to really reach more people?
I think it is the faith-based organizations that have to come together and accept this as a concept for life today and for the future, because there isn't another method that's sustainable. And so I think that where the Jains and the Hindus and some others, Buddhists, might agree immediately with that concept of ahimsa, but I think that within all the traditions, there's this concept that life is sacred, and not just human life, but all forms of life is sacred. And so people have forgotten this. And so I think we just have to beat the drums and remind people that your tradition says, do no harm. And so if we can share this message more and more with people, it would make such a huge contribution to bringing about transformation in a positive direction.
Yeah, I think I'd love for you to share a little bit or speak on the fact that sometimes, people might follow historically an idea that ancestors or people believe, but applying that in the modern day seems to be difficult sometimes. For example, I find with dairy that somebody might say, okay, we don't eat animal products, but we do consume eggs or dairy products, and they don't really look under where that product has come from and the effects of the animals that have provided it, what's happened to them, what happened to their children, what kind of life they've lived. Do you find that there's some kind of blinkers on in terms of, this is what our book says, this is what we did, or this is what our previous generations did, and so we're not going to apply that wisdom in the current situation?
Take the example of dairy. It's not just what our ancestors did, but it's a fact that 100 years ago, or maybe even 50 years ago, the cow was part of the family, and you knew what the cow was being fed. It was all organic. There weren't fertilizers. There weren't any pollutants around. And so I think at that point, there was no harm in terms of drinking milk or having milk products. But today, the situation has changed so much, but yet people don't have the information that dairy and beef are linked together absolutely, completely, or the harm that's being done to animals through dairy production. It was only when I saw a video film about 40 minutes long, I think, called Cowspiracy. I think it must have touched millions and changed people's hearts. So it was when I saw that I thought, I can't carry on just having dairy because it's part of the system. But I just had to say that enough is enough. I'm not going to have that anymore. And so I think that people need education. Even today, especially in India, when I say to people that cows are not producing milk naturally, there's a whole system of violence connected with all of this, they won't believe it. They think, no, the cow is sacred and so on. But I think that education is so important and so much needed. And when they understand that this is exactly what's going on, then I think that they'll agree and change.
And I think it's difficult to change anybody once they have very firm and fixed beliefs. But just by sharing love and education and being there with them and leading by example in those kind of ways. Because we spoke earlier when we were having lunch about some activists who can be very kind of violent in their communication or method of how they make change. That is all. The means is just as important as the end. So what has been your approach?
Just to tell people this is what I do, and they become curious and they want to know a little bit more, so I explain to them. And in fact, there are 3 very good reasons now. One, of course, is the spiritual side, which is absolutely vital to understand. But the other is the environmental side. If today people were to go to plant-based diet and food, it would make such a huge contribution to reducing the carbon emissions. And so if you're truly an environmental activist, then the challenge is to follow that through and also become a vegan. And the third is health. There's a lot of evidence that's available about the impact of plant-based diet in a very positive way in terms of your health. And the other side where animals are being, factory farming means antibiotics. 70% of the antibiotics that are being produced are being used for animals in farming. And so what is happening to all of that? Why is it that doctors today will try one antibiotic, it doesn't work, another one, another one, another one, another one? It's because the body's taken so much, it's taken in so many antibiotics already that it's become resistant. And so if people begin to look at it even from the health perspective, so you have 3 different levels in which you can approach this transformation. And if you stop and think about it, what am I doing to my health? What am I doing to the planet? What am I doing to my spiritual health? Then I think more people would turn around.
Yeah, we've definitely seen a big increase, haven't we? And particularly for the environmental reasons, at least here in the UK.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure we're seeing that in India. But still, I think the majority of emissions that are being pumped into the environment, or the environmental damage, is still largely caused by the West, overconsumption of the West. But I think a US citizen causes 30 times an Indian citizen on average. But we are aspiring to be living in that way. So the direction is bleak if people follow a consumerist pattern. I want to read something that was written by Ram Dass, or spoken by Ram Dass, and I'd love to get your reflection on it. He said, "Wisdom for the current moment. I can disagree with a political leader's actions. I can legislate. I can do civil disobedience if I think what they support is wrong. I can disagree with actions that are not compassionate. But I want to keep my heart open. If I don't, I am part of the problem and not part of the solution. And that's just not interesting enough. That's what the inner work is, to become part of the solution. So going around being angry at everything and everybody is a cheap pie. It really is. You don't have to act out of anger in order to oppose something. You can act to oppose something because it creates suffering. You can become an instrument of that which relieves suffering, but you don't have to get angry about it. Social action does not have to be pumped up by righteous indignation or anger. That's working with dark forces. That's working with fear. You can work with love. You can oppose somebody out of love. You can do social action out of love. And that's the way you win the whole war and not just the battle."
Beautiful. I agree completely. Yesterday, I was with a small group of people, and the discussion was about anger and how can there be righteous anger that can turn things around. And from a spiritual perspective, what I said was that anger is a negative energy. And if there is injustice, then I'm trying to put something right, but I myself am committing a wrong. So 2 wrongs aren't going to bring about right. And so I need to change that energy of anger into compassion and love. And then with that power, we can change injustice. One of the group was a young man who was from Rwanda. And he spoke in a very gentle voice. And he said, "I was 7 years old when the Rwanda killings happened. My father was one of the people who was killed. I grew up getting angry and bitter age 15, I was going to become a killer. And I thought that was the way to revenge my father's death. And something changed in me. And I realized that there had to be forgiveness.
Mm.
And when I felt forgiveness, I felt the anger dissolve. That's what saved my life. And this is why I'm here today. And so it was a beautiful testimony of one individual moving from revenge to forgiveness, from anger and bitterness, to being free from that, to the space where there was a recognition of the sanctity of life and love. So, yes, what you read was very beautiful.
15 years ago, we were living in Luton, and my wife was 7 months pregnant. We were at our family home with my parents. My grandmother was with us at the time. She was sleeping upstairs, and some burglars broke into our home. And as they came into the home, they grabbed my father and pushed him into the house. And they had weapons. They had like a lot of intention to do a lot of harm. And I was standing in the kitchen, and my wife quickly grabbed the phone and ran into the front of the lounge, just away from their sight. And my mother quickly dialed 999 and threw the phone underneath the chair. They thought very quickly to do this. But I was tied up, hit over the head. It wasn't a real gun in the end, but we thought it was a gun because it was the shape of a gun. So we were, thinking in that moment that it could have been like a fake pistol or a pellet gun or something. But they had banged me over the head. I was lying in my father's blood on the floor. And it was a really horrible scene where they were trying to extort money or to extort, gold. Where is the gold? Where is your money? They were beating my father. They tied us up on the floor. They dragged my sleeping grandmother downstairs and made her sit on the floor. My wife was 7 months pregnant as well. So, we were all tied up in the house. And it was a really, kind of dark moment. And fortunately, within around 15 minutes, the police came. And 2 of them were caught, and 1 ran away. And a few months later, I was in the court where they were being adjudicated in court. And I felt so much anger, so much, revenge, and that I wanted. And, they were just cold. When you looked at them, there was like somebody on drugs with no emotion, no feeling. But when I looked over, one of the men's father was sitting next to us, watching his son have this guilty verdict, and tears coming down his eyes. And then when I saw him, I felt compassion. That this is just somebody who's lost their way, and their father is crying next to it. My father next to us. And that intention and that art wasn't inhuman. That softened my feeling. Sometimes when we're feeding the homeless and go dynamic on the streets, trying to serve people who are really lost, when you're looking at some of them, they're completely lost. I see those people who did that to our family in that way, and I feel unless you have a spiritual lens or compassion or heart-to-heart lens, it's like drinking salt. You can't heal the challenges of the world without that spiritual understanding, compassion.
I believe that that's the answer to the world's problems, to go deeper inside ourselves and discover the peace, the truth, the love, the purity, the joy that lies within. And as you emerge these natural qualities of the soul, because they are natural to us, anger isn't natural. When there's anger, what happens to my blood pressure? What happens to my heart rate? Everything's going crazy. So it's not natural. people say that anger is natural. No, it's not. It's very unnatural. That's why my body suffers when I feel that. When I feel love, the heart is balanced, the body is comfortable, and I can relax. And so the original qualities of the soul are peace and love and truth. They're not the negative forces. And when we come back to these original qualities, not only is my mind at peace and comfort, but my body is the same. There's good health. Relationships become very powerful and positive and beautiful. The contribution I make to the world is also going to be positive. The productivity I have at work is going to increase. All this is research that's been done by people who do positive psychology. That yes, when there are positive feelings and emotions, things go well. And when there are negative feelings and emotions, things go down. And today, if you feel the fear, if you feel the anger and the hostility in the atmosphere, you can see that it's a dark period we're going through. But of course, the tradition of India is to think not in linear terms, but in cyclical terms. And what I would say is that we're at that point of darkness, which is the darkness just before the dawn. And the dawn has already broken. There's so much more awareness of spirituality and meditation that I've witnessed within the last 30 years or so. People wanting to understand, trying to find meaning and purpose and values. All this is what's going on. It's happening quietly. The negative forces are the descending energy and they're the visible one. And the ascending energy is quiet, but it's happening. And I think it's coming to the surface very quickly.
And what is your practice? What is the meditation practice for? How can people learn to meditate?
It's a very simple practice because we don't say stop your mind. That's next to impossible because the function of the mind is to create thoughts. But what I can do is channel my energy of thoughts and feelings away from the mundane or the ordinary and the negative to a higher plane. Awareness of the self, awareness of the divine, and have that internal dialogue, first with myself, and then a dialogue with the divine. And that's meditation. Totally natural. Don't have to have a special posture. Don't need a specific image. Just use our thoughts in the best possible way to know the self more deeply and to connect with the Supreme. That's called Raj Yoga. Yoga, union, and Raja, the sovereign, the master, because it brings mastery over the self and it's the highest yoga with the Supreme. So Raj Yoga.
There's a beautiful verse in the Chandogya Upanishad, which I always love, which says, the entire universe, all of the moon, the stars, the birds, everything that exists here and everything that doesn't exist here is hidden within the cave of our hearts. And when you have that, I feel then you operate from a place of abundance and a place of not requiring anything, not needing anything, because you already have it all. And then when you're serving from a full cup, you have a lot to give abundantly. You seem to carry that energy for me, and knowing you over the last few years, especially since, I think, COP 27, the COP 27 in Glasgow. Since that moment, I've always watched you from the sidelines as somebody who carries themselves with so much grace and love and happiness, but still does social work.
My experience of meditation and my companionship with very powerful yogis has taught me so much. I'd always be grateful to the divine and those yogis. And what I've learned from them is that if I stay aware of the inner being, the soul, Atma, the point of light in the center of the forehead, and I stay connected with the divine, there's nothing missing in my life at all. Everything is there. not only it'll come, but it's here and now. And so that sense of gratitude and fullness is what allows me to continue, because I've been doing this work now for 50 plus years. And people say, well, aren't you tired of all of this? No, not at all, because there's still so much more to be done. And so, yes, it's a sense of great joy, gratefulness at what I've received, but also the joy of sharing, knowing that others are looking for all of this. And if I can help them even a tiny bit on the path, on that journey, it's good.
You know, one of the reasons for doing this conversation, which we call Moved by Love, first it was started, do you know Vinoba Bhave, also from Maharashtra? He helped through his land Bhutan movement, when he walked around and asked the rich to give to the landless peasants, and not only give them land, but train them in farming and make them strong themselves, independently strong and constructive in their own lives. For me, that was moving by love, you know, and going around and sharing that movement. And, you know, one of the reasons for doing these conversations as Godharmic's work expands and the people who connect with the various projects that we do is to allow them to connect on a spiritual and social level with these deeper ideas that can make them also personally strong and to be able to serve. I think like Gandhiji, when he said satyagraha, it wasn't only an external independence, it was an internal independence of becoming self-strong. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, so that people can see a way of being an activist, so to speak, but from a place of not moving, active stillness.
There's one particular incident that I want to share with you. Around that time when I'd said to Brahma Baba that I want to surrender, and Baba said I knew it already, there was another opportunity in which it was just Baba and myself, just the two of us alone. And Baba asked a question: is it possible to remove all suffering from the world? I was 19, he was 93. I didn't have an answer. And he said, yes, there is. Then he said, is it possible to feed everyone in the world? He again said, yes, there is. The third one, is it possible to have good health for everyone in the world? And he said, yes, it's possible. And he said, all of that is possible, but only if we remove lust, anger, greed, attachment, and ego. But you can't tell people to do this. You have to do it yourself, and then others can learn by watching you. But if we were to do this, there would be heaven on earth. And that struck deep within my heart, and it stayed with me. And in the year 2000, when it was the Millennium Peace Summit at the UN, it was a gathering of religious leaders for the first time at the UN. 1,000 religious leaders gathered in there, orange and white and red, and it was a beautiful gathering. And there were two women who spoke in the opening ceremony. All the others were men, representatives of all the different faiths. One was Sister Jayanti, and the other one was Amma from India, both women from India. And Sister Jayanti shared a meditation which was very powerful and explained about Om and Om Shanti. Next day was a working group, and within that were the Assistant Secretary Generals and the Under Secretary Generals of the UN. They represented all the different branches, the units of the UN: Children at Risk, Population Fund, Environment, WHO, International Labour, all the different departments. And each one had a very sad tale to tell. They said that since the beginning, the aim had been peace in the world and to make the world a better place for all. But the conditions that they were talking about in terms of their units, every single department reported a downward turn instead of an upward turn. And they said, except one, WHO, and they said they'd been able to deal with smallpox and also leprosy. These were the two things that they'd been able to deal with. They thought they dealt with tuberculosis, but that had come back again. So those two things. And they said that, but what was on the horizon was mental ill health. And so, but everyone reported a downward turn, even though there's more money available, human resources available, more information available, more equipment available to be able to turn things around. So why is it that all this was happening? Things were getting worse. And they said it was because of lack of will, and human hearts had to change before there could be a change. And so I was reminded of what Baba had said. And so when human hearts change, and instead of me and I and mine, there's then the we and ours and the sharing with the love and the generosity of a human family. It's one world, one planet, one home, one future destiny, and definitely one family under the parenthood of the Supreme. So spirituality is really the way that we can turn the darkness into the light. And I see that it's happening, and it gives me not even hope, it's a certainty that the day has to come, and the day is not far off.
That's a beautifully positive note for us to come towards the end of our conversation. And actually, the second reason what I would share is, the first is that the community gets to benefit from hearing from somebody like yourself who's been living and breathing spirituality and service. But the second is more selfish, that I also get to ask you lots of questions and spend time with you and ask you, things that I find deeply interesting and attract my heart towards giving me strength to serve. What message would you like to share to people who may be listening out there, 1 or 100 or whoever is out there, and that's is anything that they might be feeling like disheartened, maybe anxious, maybe depressed by the outlook of it all. We're living in a age of so many wars that we are fighting over what people believe in. We are experiencing floods that are greater than places in Europe have ever seen. I mean, places in the global south have been experiencing this for a long time, but when it's here and close by, then, that's also cause for concern. We're living in a country where so much food gets wasted while children go to school hungry in rich environments. All of these expressions of suffering are amongst children growing up and seeing this firsthand. What message would you like to share with them?
I'd say that it's so important to make time for the self. People talk about me time, but to have that time in which I can go deeper and deeper inside myself and connect with the being that I am and find that peace and love and truth and purity and joy within. And then further, that's the start of the day, and to keep that consciousness through the day. And at night, just to ask myself the question, could I have done something differently? And secondly, what did I learn today? If each one of us were to do these two very simple practices, there would be such a transformation within one, And that transformation of one would impact family and friends and reach further out and further out. Because I do see that inner transformation is the need of the hour. And while I'm just focused out there, yes, there's a lot of fear and anxiety. When I go inwards, I recognize the eternity of the spirit that I am. And that takes away so much fear. And when I connect with the divine, there's no fear at all.
Yeah, I always remember that the Bhagavad Gita, the first of Krishna's teachings is fearlessness. And the first of the Devi Sampan, the 16th chapter, the first value he shares is fearlessness to Arjuna. What is fearlessness from a spiritual sense?
Knowing that I am eternal. And so long as I follow God's directions in terms of the spiritual laws, there can never be any injury or harm that comes to me.
So Sister Jayanti, this is the Ahimsa book, which I'd like to share with you as a first copy. It has your wonderful contribution in that. Thank you so much for being a part of it. There's many contributions, and yours is a wonderful one, of sharing this message of non-violence and ahimsa and making peace with nature, which is so important. I'm so grateful that you are one of the contributors there. What would you like to share about that?
I see that you've got very illustrious names of people who contributed to this. So it's a privilege and honor to be part of that group, to have thoughts about spirituality, on ahimsa, making peace with nature. And yes, I deeply believe that Mother Earth has sustained us for millennia. And it's time for us to acknowledge this, recognize this, and also learn to respect nature itself. For me, the whole concept of ahimsa, of non-violence, and doing no harm to others starts with respecting the sanctity of life. And so when I know that I am that conscient living being, the sentient being that's able to feel and think and understand, and when I'm in touch with that being that I am, then I realize the sanctity of my own life, and I'm able to respect myself. I'm then able to respect you as a being of love. But that then extends further to the entire human family. It goes further to all forms of life.
Wow.
And then beyond that to nature itself. And so starting with this awareness of not harming the self, but learning to respect the self and value the self, and even loving the self, and allowing that to move out further and further and further, is a transformative power that can change the darkness of the world and bring about a better world. I'm absolutely convinced that it is said, ahimsa paramo dharma. It's the foremost quality of dharma, righteousness, religion, a sacred way of life. And people have forgotten this. So I hope that this book will remind them of that. And of course, their contributions will go towards planting trees. So that's even more beautiful. And so thank you for making this happen. And I love the green that you've chosen. It's lovely. But congratulations for this.
Thank you so much. I deeply appreciate you being up for that.
Thank you for your profound questions and for creating this space to make this happen.
It's my blessing. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.